Welcome, everybody. This is the Internet Marketing Unleashed Blab podcast, YouTube video. Thank you very much for joining us, whether you're here live and in person or watching or listening later. I'm Scott Patton, the Dean of Blogonomics and Podology. We're planning on talking about sponsorships for podcasts, sponsorships for any events that you're thinking of doing. And unfortunately, my co-host Martin Wales has gone AOL on me, hasn't shown up, don't know where he is, but we're not going to let that stop us. We're going to move forward. So if you have any questions, pop them off. I think they're in that side, although it could be that side depending on how the video here works, and I'd be happy to answer them, or pop on if you've got anything you want to say about sponsorships or anything else having to do with podcasts or internet marketing. I guess the first thing I want to say about sponsorships is the advantage it has over like having somebody advertise on your show is the advertisers want to know that there were so many people that clicked through or so many people that bought. And in the big scheme of things, like if you're a large supermarket, that sort of stuff is pretty easy to tell and pretty easy to track. But if you're just doing if you're doing a podcast, and not if you're just doing a podcast, but if you're doing a podcast, then it's not the same thing, right? And this is why sponsorship is so much easier, so much better, it's less stress is, I think, the way I would put it, than actually having somebody be an advertiser. Okay, because the idea is with sponsorship is this is brand awareness. You're creating goodwill in your community, and it's not unusual. I think there's a lot more sponsorships going on than people realize. I grew up working for a large grocery chain in Western Canada, ended up being a manager for them, and pretty much for 15 years, worked for them for 20 years, and each store had I forget what we called it, kind of like a charity slush fund. That's not what we called it at all. But the idea was we had a budget, and it might be $1,000, could be $2,000, depending on the size of the community, the size of the store. And so when the local Girl Guides came in and they said, Mr. Patton, I would, really like, we're doing this fundraising party thing, whatever it is, for the Girl Guides to raise money to support Girl Guides. I'm just using them as an example. It could be any community group. Then we would either donate product like hamburgers and sausages and corn, potato chips and cobs of corn or whatever they wanted, or we would give them $100, $50, $20, $30, $100, $200, whatever they asked for usually. And then, of course, they would put company name up, and away you go. So this is another thing that you can do in your podcasts. And certainly, I really think, like I've been doing a lot of Udemy, I was going to say commercials, the courses, and I think it's an awesome thing for Udemy instructors, right? Like you have this area of expertise. Like I know one who's an amazing music teacher. Well, she could approach Yamaha and say, you know what, I'm doing these courses, and what I'd like to do is, feature your piano, feature your guitars, feature whatever it is that you've got, and all you have to do is let me use the product or make a donation or whatever it is, right? So I think when it comes to looking at sponsors and sponsorships, you need to look at more than just the dollar part of it. You need to look at, what is it that you want? Is it helpful for you to have products, right? Like, for example, I've approached Lipson, which is the largest podcast host in the world. They're an absolutely amazing company. And I got them to agree to let me do a training in one section of my course on their platform, which was great. And this was kind of the beginning I'm hoping of a relationship with Lipson. They like the training that I put together. And now in the new year, my plan is to go to them and say, I want to do a course that's a full-on just Lipson training, because they've got apps, they've got this, they've got subscriptions. They have a whole pile of things that are really, really advantageous for podcasters. And I want to, first of all, share that with my students. And secondly, I want to cement that relationship. Okay, so if I go to them and I say, I'd like you to sponsor this course, the course is on Lipson, well, so what am I expecting out of them, right? And what are they expecting in return? Well, I'm expecting that I'm going to be able to say I've got 4,000 students now. I want to increase it to 8,000 students. And those students will, of course, learn a lot about your platform, and hopefully they'll use it. What I hope to get out of it is an intimate understanding of their platform, because if I teach it, I'm going to know it very, very well. I'm going to have ins to, their staff for answering questions, that sort of stuff. And then when I'm done the course, if they like it, which I'm expecting them to like, so basically the beginning sponsorship is just, here you go, Scott. There's the number one top LEN membership that we've got. It's $400 a month or whatever. Go for it, use it. Because you're going to need that to create your course, and hopefully I'll be able to continue to use it for no charge for the rest of my life, which would be a nice thing. But then what have they got that they can bring to me? They have hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of podcasters. It might be hundreds of thousands. I'm not sure. I haven't done a count recently. And what do those podcasters need? Well, they need training on how to be better podcasters. They need training on how to use the system. They need all these things. So I'm willing to do the course with the idea that hopefully I can get Lipson to like the course enough that they'll be saying to people, you know what? Here's a free coupon. Take this course. You're going to learn a lot about podcasting. Once they're in as my students, I can upsell them to other courses, how to be more persuasive, how to get sponsors for your podcast, how to make money with your podcast, all these things that Lipson doesn't talk about, doesn't deal with. And so I'm hoping to bring this huge group into my course structure. And so that's the advantage of having them as a sponsor. So there are some people that just go and say, hey, I want you to sponsor me. Give me $10,000 or $20,000 or $2,000 a month or whatever. And that's great. But what about the long term? What's going to create a long-term viable business for you? And in my opinion, this is a great advantage of sponsorship, because Lipson's not going to be saying to me, Scott, we checked and there was only 2 people that signed up from your course, because they're the sponsor. They know that that's branding. They know that Udemy is growing at leaps and bounds, and they're going to be able to take advantage of that growth. So that's kind of the way I look at sponsorships and how it works. So at this point, if anyone wants to jump aboard, I'm done the formal part of my talk, and look forward to just chatting with you or blabbing with you about whatever you want to chat about or blab about. Kind of weird being here all by myself, kind of the first time actually. Kind of lonely. All right, we've got Ileane Smith joining us. She's a blogger, podcaster, YouTuber, social media diva, and an excellent instructor. So welcome to the show, Ileane.
Ooh, hey.
How are you doing?
That fixed. Hang on. Hey.
All right, you're a little less washed out. And I've got the sun shining through my window right now, which wasn't happening. Find
Yes.
So what are you up to?
Well, actually, I'm glad you're talking about podcasting sponsorships, because actually my podcast had been on hiatus until about a month ago. So I'm back.
Bad.
Behind the mic. So, I had to focus on different things, with me doing the YouTube as well.
Yes. So do you ever take your YouTube videos and just extract the audio and put it up on your podcast?
Yes and no.
Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? I mean, if you're, clicking, it's kind of hard to have that as an audio.
what happened was I was interviewed on a Google Hangout on air by my friend Wade Harmon. And I used that interview. I extract the audio from that and put that up as an episode of the podcast.
Okay.
So that's why I said yes and no, because it wasn't really my it wasn't really
was it yours?
It was his video, but he's so kind. He let me do that. So yep.
Of course, it's just more promotion, more exposure for him. Of course he will.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if you want, I'll send you this recording and you can chop up and take whatever you want and use it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So what's your podcast?
It's the Miss Ileane Speaks podcast.
Ooh, what does Miss Ileane speak about?
Blogging, social media, and YouTube. Yep. And so now I'm actually recording my podcast on Blab.
I think that's a great idea. I actually do two things now. Like, it's funny because people say, like, what sort of, how should you do it? And it's like, the Blab is the easiest and Google Hangouts is second easiest. So depending on the structure of the content, I use one or the other almost all the time. Right? I'm trying to think of the last time. I mean, unless I use like my phone to record two of us and we're out somewhere, like at an event or something like that. But if I'm home, why would I not make a video? And why would I not, take advantage of the people here and the people on YouTube and everywhere that you can put it?
Yeah, and the thing I love about Blab is how they send us the audio file. So that's just one less step. We don't have to extract anything. They already send us the link to download that audio file. So I absolutely thought, and I'm very comfortable on Blab because for the most part, Scott, I'm on Blab just about every day. Well, actually every day. I shouldn't even say just about. I've been on Blab every day since I joined. And it's been 130 something days. So
130 Blabs?
Well, I'm not always hosting.
No, but I mean,
like right now, I'm on your Blab. So, and I was actually on earlier. So, but every day I make sure that I get on camera and that, my voice is heard on Blab. Yep. And so, I'm comfortable. I feel comfortable here. It's just like, my second home, even though I am home.
So what obviously it's made some difference to you. Like, what are some of the advantages of having been on Blab that much?
Well, in terms of the podcast, let me just speak specifically in terms of the podcast, because like I said, I feel comfortable here. And so one of the challenges that I had with the podcast was writing up the show notes and doing all the editing. So I decided that in order to just get it done, be more consistent, I will write my show notes ahead of time because I wasn't doing that before. I was just talking off the top of my head. I had bullet points, but I didn't have show notes.
Right.
So
how long are your show notes?
Well, and that's the other thing. I'm keeping the episodes short. I'm keeping the episodes shorter. And so this way, all I really have to do is some editing. But because Blab lets you pause the recording, okay, so a lot of times I will start, I'm reading from my script and I let my audience know, guys, I'm recording the podcast. In about 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be done reading, and then I'll open up the seats and we'll, have conversation. So what happened just yesterday was the conversation got so good after I finished that I turned the recording back on. And it went on for an hour, but I didn't want to put all of that on the show because, like I said, I'm keeping them shorter now.
Right.
But there were some golden nuggets that, were very on topic about what I was talking about, which was YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to just extract those little parts. And then I came back afterwards because I used Audacity to edit. And then I just explained, okay, so now I'm on Blab, guys, and there's 4 people. And I said who the people were. Well, it was 3, including myself. Right. And then there was another snippet. And I said, now this question came from the chat. And this person wanted to know such and such. And then I added in the part where I answered the question. And then some of the other blabbers were contributing to that question as well. So, but like I said, it went on. So I got tons of content if I ever want to revisit that topic, because we had some of the best blabbers, and even the people that were asking the questions were on point. They asked good questions. And
quality of your life depends on the quality of your questions, someone said to me once.
Yes. I mean, because sometimes people get off topic, and there's nothing wrong with that in a blab. But with a podcast, you don't want to just be all over the place.
No, that's right.
I was talking about YouTube, and so then the questions came up about Periscope. And it was like, okay, I really don't want that Periscope part in there. So that's the part that I didn't put. But later on, now if I do a different episode and I'm talking about Periscope, I got that Periscope stuff that I can grab from yesterday and plop into another episode, because the Periscope stuff was good. It just wasn't relevant to YouTube.
We have 2 questions, which is great. Walter just asked, what constitutes a good question?
Yep. And I kind of just answered that, Walter, but I'll just do it a little bit more detail. And for a podcast, I think it's different. But if the question is on topic, okay, so if you're going to add, like if you were to just say right now and ask a blab question, because I saw this happen earlier in a blab today, and somebody said, how do I reply to somebody on blab? And it was like totally off topic. It was a good question, but it was totally off topic for what that particular blab was about. They asked a blab question. So that, I hope that helps answer.
So I'll jump in on that.
What do you think, Scott?
We're talking about sponsorship, and Jeff also put a question, and he kind of pulled it back to the sponsorship topic. So a good question is, what does your sponsor want? Okay. And how can you provide what your sponsor wants? Now, Martin Wales was going to be joining me, and he, like a lot of people say, well, I haven't done a podcast, or my podcast has 2 downloads a month, or it's, I'm just starting out. How can I get sponsors? And he says, that's the best time to go for sponsors. And then someone else will say, well, I've got, 100,000 downloads a week. What should I do about sponsors? He says, oh, you're in a great position to get a sponsor. So it doesn't matter. It's always a good time to get a sponsor. But if you're just starting out, you can say, I'm going to be launching my podcast, Mr. Sponsor. I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing that. And we expect, because I've got Ileane on board and Scott on board, that we're going to be able to, touch about 10 million people. You add up this and you add up that and you add up this and you add up that. And the next thing you know, you have a huge number because, there's 39 million people on Twitter, and Ileane covers, half of that, and Scott covers 2% of it. So that gives you, and away you go with your figures, right? Stats are beautiful. Like there's stats, and lies. I think they're all the same. Mm-hmm. So that's the biggest question: is what does your sponsor want? Okay, and then how can you do it? I always think of it as an irresistible offer. Okay, I was going to say an irresistible question, but I've done some courses with some co-instructors on Udemy, and when I talk to them, I say, well, I'm going to do this. You're going to show up for an hour and a half and answer the list of questions that you gave me on the topic that you're the expert of, and then I'm going to edit and do this, and then you're going to watch the hour. So it's going to take you 2.5 hours to put up a course. What do you think? And they go, well, okay, right? And I do the same thing when I want to co-host or not a sponsor or a guest on my podcast. I'll say, you know what, we're going to talk for about 10 minutes. I actually blatantly lie. And can you afford to take 10 minutes out of your day so that I can just call you up on Skype, or we can do a Blab or whatever. And I know anybody who's excited about their topic cannot ever talk for 10 minutes. And it's going to be 20 minutes, which is kind of what I aim for. It might be a little bit longer, that's okay. And as long as they know, okay, it's 10 minutes, and I'm going to say, we need a little bit of time at the beginning to kind of get warmed up before we go on air, and a little time at the end to kind of debrief. So don't just schedule 10 minutes and then you got to go. We want to be able to be relaxed about this. And then most of them aren't that strict on their schedule. So the result is I get a great chat with them. I get a great connection with them, and they've joined in. So when it comes to questions, in my opinion, it's, what advances the conversation. Like, there are closed questions and open questions. Closed question is, Ileane, do you have the light on in your room? Yes. Right? And what's she going to say after that, right? But an open question would be, Ileane, I love your glasses. I have glasses too, and I've been thinking about getting new ones. Where did you get those? Like, I need to know, the Ileane line of glasses. And of course, what's going to happen is she's then going to go off and talk about this for as long as, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, as long as she has, excitement about that topic. So if you want to just sort of get information like quickly, that's the yes, no answer, or is your light on or off on sort of thing. Those are closed questions. They don't invite huge discussions. And then the other side of it is you want the people to express more. So what is it that the sponsor wants? You could even ask them, what's really important to you in your business? Is it important being, with lots of goodwill, or is it important, are you in a high sales growth period, or, what is, and once you kind of get that, you can sort of twist and turn and make sure that's what you're giving them. You want to give them what they want, and you want to be clear on what you want. And I'm going to bounce. I think Jeff asked another question, but you just put something here. So it's interesting. Let me play the devil's advocate. The potential sponsor, in my opinion, is just about anybody that could help pay the bills per se. Here's the rub. In my opinion, I have to have the working knowledge to be a host or even a specialist. That will lead more listeners to me. Does that make sense? Yes. I could have the greatest voice in the world, but if I don't have a basic theme, won't I be describing the straws? So, Jeff, I think what you're talking about is that you need to have an area that you want to specialize in, or that you want to talk about, right? So it's not, yes, sir, he says. So that's your first decision. It's like, what are you really passionate about? What are you really excited about? What do you really want to do? So now Walter just asked, how flexible will the sponsor be in exchange for being exposed on a viral show? I would say very flexible, right? I mean, it's your show. You can kind of set the parameters and the rules and work with the sponsor. Like, oftentimes the sponsor is, you're going to be in the show notes, a link to your place, all that sort of stuff. And it's going to be, the Scott, Patton, and Ileane Speaks podcast sponsored by Walter of blah, 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 or whatever it is, right? And then there'll probably be some point in the whole conversation where we want to do a product placement. Walter is an expert microphone manufacturer, so just wanted to let everybody know this is the Walter brand of microphones, and I just love it, because I've been using it for X, blah, 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 right? And if you watched my show, 2 months ago before I got this great microphone, you would have noticed that the sound of my voice was a lot poorer than it is today, and really want to thank Walter for that. So to me, I hate commercials in podcasts. Like, I like to listen to talk radio And when I listen to it, what frustrates me is Ileane's going to be on. The announcer goes, Ileane, thank you very much for joining us. And I really want to know what you think about Periscope. And Ileane's about to talk, and he says, but first, we need to have a word from our sponsor. And then we've got the weather, then we've got the news, then we've got the sports, and breaking news. In Chile, we've got this catastrophe. Sorry, Ileane, we'll be back in a couple hours. And it goes on, and so it goes every 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. With podcasting, it's not the case. So I really... And again, it depends on the individual and the different types of podcasters, but the type of podcaster I am and most of the people I know, it's just get out there and work it in. If you have to work it in, otherwise just, sponsored by. And I know some people where they have 3 segments. This is a segment we talk about Periscope. This is a segment we talk about Blab. This is a segment we talk about YouTube. And now we're going to be moving into our YouTube segment sponsored by Ileane Smith. And Ileane does this, that. Get her at Ileane.com and blah, 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 right? So, I mean, you can put that in and that's it, and that's a certain amount. You could have them sponsored. And so there's a third of the show. That's a third of the price if you want, or it's a price. And then you've got the whole show is sponsored by Walter. Walter pays a different price. And he gets this, and he gets that, and you pile on all the benefits, but the benefits are not you're going to have 10 new customers a week, because you can't promise anything like that. This is going to get you exposure to, and every week or 2 weeks you send them a screenshot of the map showing that all the places that the podcast has gone. That's always really impressive. Mm-hmm. Wow, look at that. All these, on my podcast, it has all these little circles, right? And their bigger circles mean bigger people. Mm-hmm. And it's just great. So Jeff says, let's talk dollars and cents. Great questions, by the way, Jeff. I'm so happy you and Ileane are here, mm-hmm. and Walter, and everybody else, Karen. So I didn't mean to leave anybody out, but Jeff is just participating, and I really love it. Let's talk dollars and cents. How can we approach a potential sponsor and compare this to radio advertising? Well, I don't know that you can or that you would. Well, where do you compare it to radio advertising is radio advertising is expensive and I'm not. That's the first thing, right? And also depends on where you are. If it's New York, it's astronomical. If you're, in a 3,000 person town somewhere, it's probably not so expensive. I also know, like where I live, 5 years ago, I did a weekly radio show on weight loss on the local AM station, and everybody else, but we got it for free because they wanted us. But everybody, I guess they sponsored us, but everybody else was paying $5,000 a month. So there's gives you an idea of the cost. I also have a syndicated radio show, and I'm looking at building. Oh, cool! I'm looking at building something on the backside in terms of a podcast. Hence the question. All right, so you already have a syndicated radio show. Okay, Ileane, you have something you want to say?
Yes, I do. I have some feedback for both Walter and for Jeff. Okay.
All right.
And I have to give you my disclaimer. I've only had one sponsor for my podcast, and it was a small, short-term sponsorship. But I listen to just about every podcast there is about podcasting. So I hear about this topic a ton. Okay. So when you talk about having a viral show, to me, that means that you're getting tons of downloads every episode. So in that case, I would suggest that you go to your host. If you're hosting with Lipson or if you're hosting with Blueberry, those two, I don't know about other hosts, they will negotiate for you for sponsors. And in fact, Blueberry sends out an email every time there's a new sponsor that comes on board. It'll send out an email and say, hey, we got this, this person or this company who wants to sponsor. If your show is related to this, and this, then get in touch with me.
Blueberry, B-L-U.
Blue it's no E's. It's
R-R-Y.
BLU. Oh yeah, no E's in Blueberry. BLUBRRY. And
And
Lipson
Lips.
is short for Liberated Syndication. So it's LIBSYN. So they will negotiate for you. Okay. Also, if you have a viral show, there's also places like Midroll, which you may have heard of before. I mean, these, if you have those kinds of numbers, then you probably want to leave the negotiations of sponsorship up to the experts. Now, when you say viral show, if you meant that you just had one episode that went viral, that may not do it for you. But if you consistently have getting a lot of downloads, okay, good. So then David is adding 5,000 plays per episode minimum. There you go. So to me, when somebody says that their podcast is going viral, they would have at least that much. I was thinking more than that, actually, but viral is a relative term. So, and I'm not trying to, these are not my numbers. That's Midroll's numbers. I just wanted to let you guys know about that in case there is somebody out there with those kinds of numbers for their show. Now, the other thing, if you don't have those kind of numbers, and let's say most of us here probably don't, then, contracts can be negotiated with, any of the potential sponsors. Sometimes it depends upon your niche and what you're podcasting about. I just heard a story recently over an interview on the podcast Answer Man. And this guy has CB radios, him and his wife. They tour around in their RVs. I think really that's where he was getting the sponsorship from. The equipment people who make the CB radios for all these RV, baby boomers that are just riding around the country, He had his sponsorship signed up before he even released his episodes. Okay. So if you've got the right niche and if you have an educated potential sponsor, all kinds of things. But if you have to sit down and educate them and they don't know the benefits of podcasting, they don't realize, then you might be just wasting your time. Because if you got to educate them, then it's like,
yeah, you want to go for sponsors that want to have what you've got to offer. So Jess says, to clarify, I'm on a radio network that airs in 5 states. I'm looking
Colorado, Nebraska, Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho.
Yeah. So so basically what I would say is see if you can have a way of leveraging your syndication, right? I mean, you're already on the air, you're already famous and doing your thing. So, I mean, I'd look at the radio network and say, you know what, boss, I'm doing this show. Would you guys want to, sponsor me, do this? First of all, think of the non-monetary things that you would like to get from the radio station, right? Maybe it's better to record in their place than at your place. Maybe it's, if I can put a 30-second ad in my show that tells people about my podcast, then you can be a sponsor of my podcast. So all of a sudden, and it's permanent, right? So you've already got some really, really good leverage, right? And when you go in, now we don't know what your topic is, but when you go into a potential sponsor who's interested in connecting with people that are your audience, you can already say, well, I'm in these states, on these channels, or on this radio station. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. That's what my listenership is. I'm telling them about my podcast. So there's going to be a movement over, they're going to be listening to me on radio and they're going to be listening to me in the podcast. Yeah, this is I like. So I always start where you are, right? Like I remember I was just talking to a fellow the other day who used to work for GNC, the vitamin people, right? And he was saying, yeah, like I've got this weight loss product that I'm coming out with or something. And he wanted some people to sponsor him. It was actually a sponsoring question. And he said, what I ended up doing was going to my boss at GNC and saying, was GNC interested? And they said no, but he said, here's a list of all of our suppliers. I'm sure they would be happy to. And he got two of his suppliers to come on board and sponsor him. Yeah, Rob Walsh is a great guy. He's actually who I talked to about adding the Lipson podcast section to my Power Podcasters course. So
great. And Todd Cochran, in fact, they recorded a couple of episodes of their podcast here, and it's called The New Media Show. And when I say they, he co-hosts that show with Rob Greenlee, who works for Spreaker. So even though they're technically competitors, they're not. They're best buds. And, they both work for podcasting hosts. Actually, Todd is the CEO at Blueberry, and Rob Greenlee is the, I would say that he's the director of content or something like that. He's got some title over at Spreaker, because Spreaker is a European company. So, and hi, Nikki. And so, your topic, the people who are the potential sponsors, all of that matters, because some niches, you're just not going to be able to educate those folks. They've got radio stuck in their head. And I'm only bringing up radio because that's what Jeff is doing. And in the areas that he's in, like Midwest, I don't know how well educated that market is, but those guys, I know that they would be willing to give you some kind of information about your niche and in your area, because they're just nice guys like that.
They are. And the conversations that you have, just be open to, have a list. The way I would do is have a list of what I want, and then have the conversation with them and just see how much of the list you can sort of check off. Because, and remember, oftentimes the money is the least important part of your sponsorship, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you can get the radio station to be running ads every hour on the hour for your podcast, like how cool is that? Just who knows what they're willing to do. And of course, if you leverage that extra traffic into more viewers, then you go to somebody else and say, you know what, I've got this many people listening to me every week. It's like, wow, that's really valuable. So here he goes again. One idea I was working with to bring a theme together. I'm a keynote speaker. I use my cattle dog to demonstrate communication and selling techniques. Awesome. It's very well received and is getting booked up more and more. So the idea was to build a podcast about communicating, selling, so on and so forth, because it falls with the topic I professionally speak about. Exactly. But this is going to be something that is interesting enough for listeners to tune in time and again. I think, well, first of all, you're not going to be repeating yourself over and over. And the key to podcasting long term is either being on top of the news or telling stories. We've sat around fireplaces for hundreds of thousands of years talking about stories of the stars or stories of the planets or all these things. So when I have a co-host and we're on a particular topic, and they always say, well, what should I talk about? All I know is my keynote speech. I go, no, what happened last week that was interesting? Well, last week I did a keynote speech at so-and-so's event, and this person came up and they talked to me about that, and we had this conversation. It was really pretty amazing, blah, 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 blah. And that's what you do, is you look for one point that you can talk about for the podcast that came out of a story that happened in the last week, if you're doing a weekly podcast, right? Yeah. You need to where, and then you need to write it down or something so you don't forget it. But to me, it's like It's just my life. I was in the Bahamas 3 weeks ago, and I was talking. I was actually staying at Airbnb. I love Airbnb because I end up staying in someone's home. I feel like I'm in the community, and I've been in enough 5-star hotels that it really doesn't do it for me anymore. And I was a block, actually it was less than a block off the Junkaroo Beach, which is the big beach right outside downtown Nassau in New Providence. And I thought, I want to kind of get out. And the guy, Troy, that I was, set me up, said, well, just take the local bus. It's $2 as opposed to, $200 for a tour. And I thought, well, I'll just go to Cable Beach. So I got on the bus. The driver said, where are you going? I said, Cable Beach. And then it filled up, and it was all locals. And by and large, we drove and we drove and we drove. And then I was the only guy on the bus, except the bus driver. And he looks at me and he says, where are you going, man? Wrong accent, I'm sorry. And I said, Cable Beach. He says, oh, it's way back there. I said, well, I just want to go to a beach for about an hour. And he looks at his watch, says, well, it's 3 o'clock. He says, there's a really nice beach just over here. I'll drop you off and I'll pick you up at 4:30. This is the local public bus, okay? So it would never, ever happen here.
Here in Philly either.
No. So he drove me in. He dropped me off at this nice little kind of resort-y type place. It wasn't a resort, but it had a little restaurant. And I got on the beach. It was gorgeous. I felt like the end of the world. And there was, 10 people on the beach. It was 2 miles long. And I had a great time. And at 4:32, he drives up in his bus and he picks me up. And I was 50-50. I was going to have to be walking 30 miles to get home, but I did it. Right? And it just showed me, a different way that people live and just how nice people are everywhere that they are. End of story. Okay, so I could relate this to communication. First of all, I communicated once to the driver, but and I thought that was enough. Obviously, it wasn't. He thought I knew where I was going and would yell out and tell him to stop. I didn't. So I need to continue the communication or communicate more. You would probably, Jeff, do a better job of expanding all of the communication faux pas and the good parts of the communication and everything else to tie into the main points that you normally make. And that was the whole point of telling that story, was we all have stories. And the way that you make your podcast interesting and not boring is you tell the stories. They're parables, right? We've grown up with parables, this parable and that parable, and the early bird gets the worm, but 2 bushes are better than 1 bird, and all those sort of things. And that's how we learn. So I may need to hear your stories 10 times to get that point that you keep trying to hammer through, but that story finally connects with me. Or what happened to me the other day was I was telling somebody something over and over and over again, and someone was in the conversation, and they popped in, and they said the same thing as me. I'm sure word for word, but the person got it from them, didn't get it from me. So to me, what I would do is just tell these stories about communication. What happened last week? And that was interesting and fascinating to you.
Yeah. Well, Scott, it's been my pleasure to sit in with you here. And for everybody who joined us, I got to run. But yeah, it's a great conversation to have. I know a lot of people are interested in podcasting sponsorships. And so hopefully you'll be able to do your interview.
No, I think he's out sitting on a beach somewhere or something, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, sometimes, sometimes
you're prettier and more eloquent. So,
oh, thank you. He trying to make me say, y'all. But no, honestly, I did. I said I was just going to get on Blab for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, half an hour later.
And you know how that happens. Oh, you're welcome, Jeff, and best of luck to you with what you're doing. And also, I'm not sure if Lord is still here, but oh yeah, hi Walter. Yes, and I know you do art. Walter does some amazing art. I mean, amazing. And I know that would do so well in a podcast. Walter, I don't know if you have one already,
You
but
better get one.
if you don't, you should, because you have talk about stories. I mean, each piece of art is a story. Yeah, we were looking at your website the other day. You might not have realized I was in the chat, and we were talking about, and you should share a link to your website, because I think everybody could appreciate your art. And each piece of art, you might think it's a collection from different artists, but it's not. It's all from Walter, and they're just, each one is amazing in its own right. And all different. I'm not sure what that word is when it's different. Like one might be a billboard or something like on the side of a bus stop, and then the other one might be a poster, and then it's so yeah, really, 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 really great stuff.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Awesome.
Yep.
We're going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you don't have a podcast and you want one, send me a message at podcasters or Scott at pattonmail, PATONMAIL.com. I will send you a complimentary copy or a coupon. It makes it free to my course on how to podcast. I'll tell you it's 10 hours, but you only need to watch about a half an hour of it, follow the directions, and you'll have your podcast up.
Oh my gosh, yes, Scott. I took that course, and that course is amazing. And some of those other extra hours that he was talking about were interviews, like Blab style, but most of them were on Google Hangouts.
That's right. There was no Blab then. Who
right.
knew?
I might even be on one of those interviews. I don't think so, but anyway, we're going
now, because I'm going to stick this one up there.
All right, good. All right, yeah, and you have to email him, and he'll give you the link for it.
Wait for a second. I'm going to actually sign off, and then I won't close everything, and I'll go get the link for you if you want to wait a second. So thank you, Ileane. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
As always, you're so much fun to be with.
All right, great. I enjoy it. All right, bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is the Internet Marketing Unleashed podcast, Blab, a YouTube channel show, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.